There we are. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm very excited about today and about our guest speakers. We will still have people joining, but because we only have an hour today, I want to keep all of that time for our wonderful speakers. Um, Thank you so much, everyone. It's our third webinar in our series PBK, Faith and Violence Against Women and Children. And today's webinar is on making sense of PBK, collating, analyzing, documenting. So as a background, maybe there are some of you who haven't joined our webinar series before. From year one of the COP, it has emerged how much learning there is from COP members, just about these intersections between faith and violence against women and violence against children. So that's why in year two, we are running this PBK initiative. And it gives opportunities for COP members to better understand PBK and how to identify it and capture it and analyze and synthesize and use PBK, but specifically PBK on, on how faith meets GBV. So based on what we do this year, we hope to build and improve the resources and support that we provide to COP members around PBK. So in October, we did our first webinar, and I'll paste the links in the chat just now. Our first webinar was on why does PBK matter to faith responses to violence against women and children. And then in November, we did the second one, and that focused on how we can identify and collect PBK. And I'll also paste that link just now. So today is our third webinar, and we look at what we do next, namely how we go about collating and analyzing and documenting the PBK that we have gathered. Let me just move the slides. So today we have two amazing speakers with us. Who will be sharing with us just around this and how to do it and giving us really practical examples and case studies from their own experiences. As many of you may already know, the organization Raising Voices has been instrumental in building our understanding, but also the evidence and the tools around practice-based knowledge, and specifically practice-based knowledge around violence prevention and response, but also about how it meets faith. So this organization has always been championing practitioners and the expertise and knowledge of practitioners. So we are really privileged that our two speakers are both experts from Raising Voices. Now, the first is Gloria. You'll see her on the screen, Gloria Kirungi. She is a public health specialist with extensive professional experience in training, research, and management of complex humanitarian and development programs. She's currently the learning coordinator at Raising Voices, and she leads strategic efforts to strengthen research, learning, and evidence generation. Then our second speaker is Dennis Okello. He's the technical advisor for learning, monitoring, and evaluation at Raising Voices. And he has over 10 years of experience supporting violence prevention, response, and gender equality initiatives across Africa, but also globally. And at Raising Voices, he works quite closely with the internal teams and partners that implement SASA and SASA Faith and SASA Together, the Good School Toolkit. And I'm sure you've heard about these programs before, and that he will be sharing around that today as well. He is particularly passionate about participatory learning processes, as is Gloria. So they really are just the perfect people to be sharing with us today. And Gloria and Dennis, thank you so much for being here today and being willing to share just some of what you've learned and what you know. So before I hand over to them, just a couple of housekeeping issues. So please introduce yourself in the chat. This is not going to be a lecture. So yes, Gloria and Dennis will have a slide deck. But we're going to pause every now and then for opportunity for reflection, for questions, for comments. We are recording this, and the recording will be shared with all COP members and will also go on the SFARI YouTube channel. Please use the chat box to post your comments and questions, but also during our Q&A breaks, you can also just unmute yourself and ask your question. And then lastly, if you have good internet where you are, please put your video on so that Gloria and Dennis feel like they are talking to people and not just talking into the void. But that is it from my side, and I'm now going to hand over to Gloria. Again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, and glad to meet all of you virtually. I hope everyone is fine. Thank you, Lisa, for inviting Dennis and I to this space. We're really excited to join the space and also be able to share some of our experiences at Raising Voices in how we've really been able to integrate practice-based learning, practice-based knowledge within the programs, and how it has improved our programming. It's something that we are happy to share with any time. So like Lisa said, we've had a series of sessions where we've talked about practice-based learning and knowledge. And we just thought that we'll take off a few minutes just to have a recap of what really it means to us. And I will request every one of you to just paste one or two words that come to your mind when we talk about practice-based learning or knowledge. We can go to the third slide. When someone talks about practice-based learning, what comes to your mind? Can just paste it in the chat. Oh, local and grassroots. Perfect. Anyone else? What comes to your mind? Learning from practice. Thank you. Learning by doing. Experiential learning, indigenous knowledge. Wow. Those are all beautiful answers. Okay. So when raising voices, thank you so much for the responses, and they all resonate with practice-based learning. Oh, documenting our experiences at the community level. Very good. So when raising voices first worked in Kampala on TASA programs, our strong focus at that time was shifting gender roles at the household level. And this approach at that time, that was about 2006, aligned with a global literature, which emphasized the importance of spouses sharing household duties as a key lever for gender norm change. However, during implementation, we found that this intention was actually creating more conflict among couples and hijacking the intention for deeper discussions around how power was being held and used within relationships. At that time, the staff and the community members took deep reflections. We observed the couples and we discussed the implications of these new emerging trends. The months that followed enabled us to actually focus on listening more to the community members and understanding the hopes for their intimate partner relationships. This resulted in a critical moment for raising voices to improve our program, to focus on the core relationship values, such as the mutual respect, care, and the feeling of being valued in a relationship, rather than just focusing on redistribution of roles. So to integrate this shift that we are learning, raising voices, we wrote considerable content of the SASA program. We were able also to revise some of our tools, our materials. We rewrote some of them. We tested these new materials and we made refinements along the way. And what emerged out of this was a more powerful and productive conversation that couples were able to take and discuss key expectations for each one of them in the relationship. And this actually caused the shift in gender norm change. This was a key starter for what we learned as practice-based learning and knowledge within our program. And this also resonates with all the things that you have mentioned in the chat. It comes from experience. It's indigenous. It looks at the daily practice, day-to-day experiences, not just by the staff, not just by the partners, but by the community members. We can go to the third or fourth slide, Lisa. Sorry, I'd forgotten. So it comes from learning. The next one. The next slide, sorry. Yes, this. So practice-based learning comes from really having actual experiences. Learning, this typical example I've just shared with you, it came from understanding these experiences. What are the couples learning? What are the couples saying? What are they telling us? What is emerging within their relationships? Is it actually causing gender norm change, or it is actually resulting into something else that we didn't expect? And that calls for reflection at the community level, as a couple, as activists, as partners, as staff, and then thinking through how can we conceptualize what we are learning? How can we remodel? How can we refine? What is it that we need to change? And then how do we try out what we have learned? On the next slide. So practice-based learning really is a journey for us. It's cumulative, it is intentional. And intentional means that each one of us who is involved in the work gives it the due attention that it deserves. Being intentional means that you're going to follow through. You're going to purpose to collect this data. You're going to purpose to follow through with the experiences. You're going to purpose to walk the journey with the people that you're intending to reach, the beneficiaries, the partners, the activists, whoever is involved. We have to be involved with them. Recognizing that practice-based learning values the lived experiences. It values the expertise that is within the community. It values the program expertise that comes from the implementation of these programs. But also it is driven by innovations, encouraging this hands-on learning, adaptation, and creative solutions is centered to practice-based learning. And above all, we see that practice-based learning actually strengthens movements. It supports organizations and activists in building sustainable, impactful violence prevention efforts. And lastly, it is important because practice-based learning actually recognizes It actually recognizes quality and relevance of what we are learning by keeping programs dynamic, responsive, and rooted in local contexts. And that resonates with what you've just mentioned in that chat, indigenous knowledge, rooted within the local context, and making interventions more effective and more responsive within the context. So on the next slide, we just briefly highlight some of the key features that we have been able to recognize. The fact that it is practitioner-led, it is structured, intentional, but yet flexible to be able to fit within the context, to be able to respond to what is emerging as and when it emerges. It is intentional and very courageous because it is nurtured by a deliberate organizational learning culture. And that's a question that I'll leave with you, all of us, in our different organizations. Is there a system? Is there an intentionality within the organization, within the spaces that we are in, that encourages and nurtures the learning culture for the staff at the community level and in every space that we are engaged in? Accessibility and being inclusive, leaving no one behind, and recognizing all the expertise, all the values that comes with it. So at Raising Voices, these are some of the things that really ground our practice-based learning and knowledge. And this is how we've been able to refine and improve our programs on a day-to-day basis. On the next slide, I will pause a bit and just take a question or two before we can proceed.
People, you can raise your hand, you can unmute yourself, you can just ask your questions, or you can post in the chat. I'm also kind of tracking what people are sending to me privately, but please, anyone, question. Gloria, maybe while everyone's busy typing, I'm noting what's been sent to me. And this is around funding. How do you get funders, program funders, to support this process? Because it's so integrated in your programming, but it does take time and it requires that flexibility, but funders want that program designed for 3 years and it's being followed that way. Maybe you get into this later and then you can pause this, but what's that conversation like when you're trying to explain the importance of this process to a funder? Please.
Okay, we can continue. I think the issue of funding is, we can have a whole day to discuss funding. But one of the things that we've learned as Raising Voices is the importance of integration within the programs. Every program that we implement at Raising Voices has learning embedded in it. So it's part of our learning culture in every program to ensure that we embed, we integrate learning within everything that we do. And that's our organization culture. And that is one thing that has helped us to ensure that we continue to learn from our practice. We continue to learn from what we do. And sometimes it does not really require funds. Sometimes it does require funds. So yes, at the point where you don't have funds, we look at what are the low-hanging fruits. If you're going for a field visit, for example, to monitor a program, what kind of learning can you embed at that point? Because you'll still use the same transport, you're going to meet the same beneficiaries. So what can you embed within the resources that you have to be able to pick as much lessons as possible? At Raising Voices, any activity, any field-based activity has learning embedded. And that's why later in the slides, you will see a small cycle that we use. We call it the learning and assessment cycle, where we track and develop tools that help us to be intentional on our learning for every program. So everyone in the organization knows if I'm going for a field visit, if I'm going to meet beneficiaries, if I'm going to meet the learners, I will have a tool that will help me gather this information. I will have a dialogue with the beneficiaries. I will have a focus group discussion. So depending on what is emerging, because in practice-based learning, sometimes the learning is actually initiated or generated from the practice itself. But sometimes what is emerging can actually lead the research or the learning that you want to generate. So integrating is one of the key aspects. But also spaces like these actually help us to create awareness and advocate for resources for some of these practices. That's why, Lisa, thank you so much, and the whole team for creating some of these spaces. Because once we have donors here, we're able to recognize the importance of embedding learning within our programs. And that is a good start. In most of the programs that I've managed before, sometimes we call it implementation science. In our space here, we call it practice-based learning, but it is a growing interest in most of the donors spaces, because we've learned that learning through experience is one of the ways in which we can actually get groundbreaking information and help us to improve our programs that are responsive and inclusive. But we can continue this conversation. Dennis, you want to add before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gloria. I just wanted to add by saying that at Raising Voices, we've been very deliberate in saying you cannot do a program without learning. So the two of them, they go together. And I think traditionally, program seems to be like an independent part, and then M&E or learning seems to be another independent pillar. But we've been so deliberate in saying, you cannot do program work without learning, and that's the justification that we have been providing. But even for violence prevention programs, if you're doing SASA faith, we're like, how can you do SASA faith effectively if you're not learning from it? And so that is what we have been encouraging our partners, but also the different organizations that are doing this violence prevention work. And also, as Gloria mentioned earlier, that it's a journey. It doesn't just happen, at once, but it's a journey that, you start taking, and, it keeps getting better and better. And, the learning component gets stronger and stronger as you go on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dennis. Two things. First one is you're quite soft when you're speaking, and I know you're going to be talking more now, and I don't want to miss a moment of what you're saying. So if you can speak up a bit, but I thank you so much for the response from you and from Gloria. And really what's standing out to me, just in a different way, and I've been reading the Raising Voices outputs for a long time, but this emphasis on monitoring and evaluation isn't automatically learning. Just because you're monitoring your program and evaluating your program, there's something different to having this culture of learning within your organization, and to really build it, like Dennis is saying, into everything. And you just explained it so well. Thank you for that. Gloria, are you handing over to Dennis now?
Yes, we have just one more slide, and then Dennis will come in. The next slide. Okay, so this is the cycle that I was talking about earlier that guides our work at Raising Voices. And like we've said, our monitoring and learning are intertwined together, and they speak to one another. So when we talk about our L&A tools, learning and assessment tools, our ongoing data collection, it all speaks to our monitoring frameworks, our monitoring processes, but also our learning processes. So these go hand in hand at Raising Voices. And Dennis will be taking us through using the Bangladesh example on how we're able to apply all these three phases, which are intertwined, which are continuous together. But before I hand over, the next slide just shows some of the reflection questions that we have at the different levels. And these are just examples during our data collection at the community level. These are some of the things that we do when we go for a regular site visit, we're able to listen into the experiences of community members, to listen to the stories, to observe, but we also build relationships, because through relationships, you're able to tap into the some of the unforeseen things that you want to learn as an organization. And we have questions that we always ask ourselves. What is working well? What is not working? What has shifted within the community? What are the facilitators facing? What are some of the dilemmas that we are observing? What is the data telling us? Those are some of the questions that we continuously ask ourselves. And with that, we are able to dig deeper into some of the issues. We're able to get more information through interviews, through observations, etc., to ensure that we're really learning deeply about whatever things or themes that are emerging from the community. And as an organization, we ensure that we analyze our data and we discuss deeply about the implications of this data, of these findings within our programs. And those are what we call our reflection times at Raising Voices. Regularly, we reflect on our data. Regularly, we reflect on what is coming in from the community. We reflect and interrogate this information. Look at listening from the beneficiaries, from the learners, from the community. What are they saying? And this is actually what informs our learning. This informs our framework for monitoring and evaluating our programs, because we are able to see the trends and we are able to adapt and make changes on a timely manner. So Dennis is going to walk us through the Bangladesh story with us, and then we'll be able to see how we've been able to apply this in real life at Raising Voices. Over to you, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for taking us through the first part of the presentation. Yeah, but also reminding us of what practice-based learning and knowledge is, and how to identify it. There are quite many things we do in our programs, and we have no idea that we are actually doing practice-based learning, and yet we are. As Gloria mentioned, that whatever we do on a daily forms part of practice-based learning, and also from the different responses that we got. And for this next part of the presentation, I'll share our experience from the Bangladesh cohort. We thought that we could share, a real practical experience where we have done it, and from the start to what translated into practice-based knowledge, just one of the products that we will highlight. And we are all, aware that, Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh hosts the world's largest refugee settlement. Yeah, with over, 723,000 Rohingya refugees who fled persecution in Myanmar since 2017. And from, evidence also suggests that, conflict worsens or increases, violence against women. And, forcibly displaced women are at an increased risk of intimate partner violence. And because of this, the Bangladesh cohort, comprising of 2 organizations supported by UNFPA and 4 other organizations that were supported by UNHCR Bangladesh, was established, and that was in 2020. And the partners adapted SAST together in Cox's Bazar refugee settlement to reduce violence against women. Next slide, Lisa. And so we'd love to share, our practice-based learning experience, within this cohort. And as Gloria highlighted earlier, our L&S cycle comprises of, 3 strands: track, analyze, and apply. And I'll speak through each and the experiences, we've had within the cohort. When you look at the first strand of the cycle, which is track, this is, where partners used learning and assessment tools to support ongoing data collection of their activities and their engagements. And in Raising Voices, we are also, very careful with the language of M&E, monitoring and evaluation. So we use more of learning and assessment. And, partners used these community level tools and institutional level tools because they were implementing all the three strategies of SASA together. And that is activism, community leadership, and institutional strengthening. And these tools capture both qualitative and quantitative data. And one thing to note within the cohort, when they received these tools, they studied these tools, adapted them to their context. And initially, they started collecting data with physical forms. But after like a year or so, when they had more capacity, they advanced to using online, data collection forms like Kobo, Collect, which we felt was something that was really good for them, that they were growing as they were doing this. And, at community level, there are several tools that the partners used, and one of them is the activity plan and report. That, basically is a plan where activists plan activities. I'm going to do this activity on this day at this time. And then when the activity is done, they report on the activity, saying we did the activity on this day. This was the topic that we covered. These are the successes, challenges, lessons, comments or community feedback. And these are the number of community members that we reached through this activity. And secondly, is the activity observation tool, which partners use to assess the quality of activities being implemented by activists, community leaders, and also it assesses the facilitation skills of those that are conducting the activities. The third tool that the cohort members used is the community change tracker. That helps. It helped partners within the cohort to begin to see shifts in terms of what community members know, feel, and do. And this tool gives an indication of that the program is moving in the right direction. So as activities are going on, one of the staff who has gone to support the activist, just observes and is able to rate based on what is being discussed, how community members, are talking about some of these issues, how they're feeling about them, and also what they are doing in their communities. And after the community change tracker, we have another tool, that the partners used, which is the community assessment survey and the focus group discussion guide. And this using this tool, partners conduct research. It's not like a rigorous evaluation research that you would call it, but you could say a mini research in their communities, to test if the changes they are seeing with the different tools that they've been collecting data with actually do exist in the communities. And the community assessment survey is safely carried out with community members with clear, processes and guidelines for organizations and partners on how to conduct this assessment. But also this assessment helped the partners within the cohort know if they are ready to progress to the next phase, because SASA is a phased approach. Then fifthly is, on the on-site TA, periodically raising voices, conducted on-site TA to reflect with the partners on their journey, observed community activities, by the activists and community leaders, provided feedback on what they are doing well in, but also while identifying, potential areas of growth for the partners, but also celebrating together, with the partners and in addition to that, holding, dialogues with government stakeholders and also the donors who are supporting these partners. And so that is at community level. And then at institutional level, because it was a big program and these partners were doing both all the strategies, and so they were also doing using the institutional strengthening strategy. And one of the tools that they were using is an institutional change tracker that also gives us indications that things are changing within the institutions that we're working with. And there is also the institutional assessment survey, which is more like the community assessment survey, only that this one is now focused on the institutions, and it's done at baseline and at end line. And at baseline, the findings from the institutional assessment survey, highlight the institution's starting point for the operational level changes they are hoping to achieve within SASA together. And at end line, that's, like after the action phase, the findings highlight what has shifted over time. For example, maybe areas around if the institution has made clear progress, maybe in terms of protocols, monitoring existing protocols or guidelines around violence against women. And there are other areas within the institution that the tool also assesses. And still at institutional level, at the end of every TA, partners provide us with feedback through the partner TA feedback form, and this has also helped raising voices to improve their support to partners. Next slide, Lisa. Yeah, it's one thing to collect data, but what do you do with this data? And it's unfortunate that some institutions are so good at collecting data and shelving it. Probably in our own journeys within the institutions, we could have been culprits at some point. But this does not help in any way. The cohort, made very good use of data collected, by going further to analyze and make sense of this data. And as we had mentioned earlier, that the tools collect both quantitative and qualitative data. So what happens when this data is collected? Now, for the Bangladesh cohort, the beautiful thing is, they started with hard copy forms. After that, they would hire data entrants to enter this data. But when they advanced to using Kobo, they also now, posed a challenge to us, and we're like, okay, how do we do entry from Kobo directly into the databases? And so we had to work together to support them on how to do that. But one beautiful thing is, the databases have the ability to automatically analyze and generate reports and visualizations. This is a feature that, we had to enhance within the program based on the lessons that we had learned from them. There's a lot of qualitative data that is also collected using the tools, but also from the focus group discussions. And just an example of what partners have done is, doing content and thematic analysis, by identifying themes related to the program. The partners would combine different data sources to ensure robustness and address limitations. But also throughout this entire process, Raising Voices provided support and guidance throughout this process, including reviewing the phase reports. And one thing that I would also love to note is, the cohort was so active in using these tools and the databases, like they would have like over thousands of records, of activities that they have conducted, that, they proactively reached out to Raising Voices on, how do we use the tools, letting us know whether the databases were helping them, to make data-driven discussions about their program. And, largely the improvement in functionality of the databases was due to, the efforts of the Bangladesh cohort. And that gave us feedback They gave us, very valuable feedback and, asked us difficult questions. And just to highlight that not only did this cohort, help us learn how the tools and databases are working, but also what challenges they are facing and what improvements can be made. And right now we've enhanced the databases with functionality of, importing directly from Kobo without any manual inputs, but also we've improved the analysis and visualization and adaptation into French and Spanish, which is something that is underway. And in the next slide, I just want to highlight, some of the analysis that comes from the databases. One of the databases, which is the activity observation database. And, this helps us assess the quality of community activities, but also the facilitation skills of activists. And for the data, we can see, when you look at this data, we can see, there's a bit of improvement. And I think I just want to pause at this point and just maybe ask one person to share with us what they are seeing in this data. Is there anyone who wants, maybe in the chat, you can just quickly type, what, from what you're seeing, with the data, what does this tell you? Yeah, someone is saying, I'm seeing that 2023 was not such a good year. That's really, that's 2023, thanks. So someone is curious about the initial dip in Q2 and Q3. That's very good observation. Okay, I think we can go with those two responses. That you can already see, from this analysis, that by just looking at the graph that the database has generated, you're able to, quickly pick out, oh, I think there's a problem with the level of involvement of the men. Level of involvement of women also, much as there's been, some improvement. Yes, thanks, Paula, for saying a low level of involvement of the men. I'm happy to see that we are connecting with the analysis. Yeah, Q2 of 2023 was not so good. So by just looking at the graph, you're able to, quickly identify, areas that you need to improve within the activity. And that's the beauty of, having information in place, but then, being able to make sense of this information and using it to improve your program. So I'll move to the next slide, which is on the facilitation skills, where, there are different areas under facilitation that we assess. And you can see there are areas around effort, knowledge of content, fostering critical thinking, respectfulness, managing tension, focusing discussion. So as activities are being conducted, we're able to observe and see what are the areas, that we need to help our activists, become better at as they're facilitating community activities. And so those are just the two analysis I wanted to highlight from the databases. But there's a key question here that, what did the cohort learn from this all this analysis that we are getting. And, one of the lessons is that, among the Rohingya community, there are strict gender norms that prohibit mixed sex community activities, hence restricting participation, not only for women, but also for men. And, after understanding the sensitivities around mixed sex activities, the cohort agreed to have same-sex group activities, but also brainstormed on places where they could, find men to participate in the activities. But also from the analysis of this data, partner staff, uh, supporting community activities, started doing practice sessions amongst each other to build skills to be able to guide the community activists in conducting quality activities, but also improving their skills. And for the facilitation, the partners will meet with activists as often as possible. And as they are meeting them, they would use this information, to tailor the kind of support that they want to provide to the activists. If maybe they identified there were issues around managing tension, so the next meeting, will focus on progress, but also how do we build the skills of the activists to be able to manage tension as they're conducting activities. And then in the next slide, once you've collected data, done the analysis, but if you do not apply this, then you have not completed the cycle of learning. And after analyzing and making sense of this data, the cohort would hold feedback and accountability sessions quarterly to share findings, interpret and examine implications, but also agree on the course of action, documentation, and program improvements. And Raising Voices participated in most of these quarterly feedback and accountability sessions, including UNFPA and UNHCR, where, would reflect on the data, ask critical questions, and also brainstorm on how do we move forward as individual partners, but also as the entire cohort implementing in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. And, throughout this process, partners were documenting insights, from start to the action phase. And this was synthesized, by the different partners, including UNFPA and UNHCR, into a practice-based knowledge product that we called Creating Change series, where, we've provided links there for the teams to access, but we just wanted to highlight how has this cohort been able to implement SASA together in the refugee setting. What are the lessons that other partners across the globe can learn from Cox's Bazar refugee settlement? But one thing that was also very key at the beginning is when we started in the start phase of implementation, we asked ourselves, okay, what are the practice-based knowledge products? Well, what do we want to produce? What products do we want to produce? And one of them, we discussed, okay, do we do a learning paper? Do we share about, the cohort and how we are implementing? Do we share about the challenges that the cohort is facing and how they've, overcome them that others can learn from? And so we did that initial brainstorm at the very beginning. That's one thing that I think is important to highlight, that even as you're starting, the final product that you are thinking of coming up with, the thinking should not happen at the end, but it should start at the beginning. And then everything that you are collecting and all information you're collecting and analyzing is going to beef up all that you discussed and planned to do at the start. The second product is one of the products that one of UNHCR, BRAC and Action Aid Bangladesh that were being supported by UNHCR after we had several discussions on the need to have for partners to develop, their own practice-based knowledge products. These two partners supported by UNHCR sat and said, okay, how can we do this? They began by saying, I think we can start highlighting, every story that we are collecting in the communities. And that is something that we can share with others. And so they, took it up, developed all these stories, got someone to help them make edits here and there. And, after that, they shared with us a link, and just reading through the stories was really very exciting to see how they had done this. And I think many of us can learn from their experience as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I'm
Thank you.
conscious of time. So I want to open the floor to any questions or reflections. Dennis, in the group chat, someone posted, I'm curious about the gender of the facilitator of the men's groups in Cox's Bazar. If you can just briefly share about that, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Yes, we encourage that, in Cox's Bazar, the men were reaching out to the men, and the females were reaching out to the females. And that is how they managed to maneuver through within their camp. Yeah.
Okay. But now I want to open it up more broadly. Any questions, any thoughts, anything anyone wants to share? You can put your hand up, you can unmute yourself, you can use the chat, whatever works for you. Dennis, while people are maybe writing, one question that was directed to me is, do you feedback the practice-based learning and knowledge learning? Do you feedback it back to the actual community members, or only to your facilitation team and volunteers? And if you do feedback to the community members, how do you go about it? Sorry, Dennis, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
I think maybe respond.
I thought you were bringing
'cause
another question.
No. I'm giving you one at a time. I'm sorry, I should have been clearer.
Yeah, I think that's really, really a very nice question. That, most times we collect information from the communities, and we do not go back to provide this feedback to the communities. It's quite different within the refugee camps. That, Cox's Bazar refugee camp is so organized in a way that the entire management of the camp is managed by the GBV, cluster. That's what they call it. So every partner who goes to the camp has to be approved by the GBV cluster, and you are allocated which camp to work in. So every partner has specific camps. There is like no duplication of efforts, and the partners who collect information within these camps go back to the communities, to the different camps, and provide feedback in some way during activities as they are conducting, if maybe they've now progressed to the awareness phase. And our activists, are trained in a way that, as they are conducting activities, they are cognizant of where communities were before. And so that is something that, can be highlighted. Oh, I can see we've made shifts on ABCD from the last time we were here, doing an assessment. And this is where, we want to go. So that's how we have been providing that kind of feedback. Within the refugee setting, it's a bit, tricky, like gathering, large groups and, giving different feedback, but that has been embedded within the activities that activists conduct. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I'm going to hand over to Nobuntu. We're running out of time, so Nobuntu will be the last question before I wrap us up. Sorry,
Thank you.
Nobuntu.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm sorry you're not going to see me. My camera is not working. I'm just going to be quick also. I'm checking the time. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Gloria, so much. And I just want to get into that part of those structures that you need to maneuver to actually work freely with the community. I'm just thinking aloud, Dennis. I'm wondering the strategy of bringing them close so that you're not working to them, you're working with, even before the community itself. In South Africa, we call that the community leaders, street committees and stuff. I'm wondering if you could use those people and bring them on in a way that they don't feel that you're coming to them, but you are with them. I'm just throwing it out there. As I said, I'm thinking aloud.
Mhm. That's really so nice, Nobuntu. Thanks for highlighting that. And I think when you mentioned the idea around the community leaders, I think SAST Together is laid out in a way that before you go to the community and even identify, activists, there are several engagements that you have with community leaders, so activists are identified, after engagement with all these other community structures. This is a program, this is the intention, bringing them on board at that point, so that when it comes to even identifying activists, their communities, where we've gone to, and some of the leaders are like, no, I think we can help you identify some of the activists. And then, using the criteria that is already documented and provided for, we're able to work with them and do that. But there is also the community leadership strategy that is part of, one of the strategies that we use in SASA Together, SASA, but also SASA Faith as well, to bring all these actors on board, to be able to, support, because at the end of the day, this is a community mobilization approach. It's not for raising voices, but it's for the community and it's for them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much, Nobuntu, both for your question and Dennis for replying. I'm going to skip forward a bit just because of time. You'll see I pasted in the chat links that Dennis and Gloria provided to several Raising Voices products, outputs, and I do want to encourage you to go and visit those and take a look. But I'm going to wrap us up now. First of all, Gloria and Dennis, thank you so much. This has been just so enriching thinking through the whole program. I wish we had more time because I personally just had more questions. But this has been just so insightful, and I think maybe challenging as well, like challenging in terms of we do need to rethink how we think about our organizational cultures and how we integrate learning. So thank you so much for that. I want to encourage everyone to attend the fourth and final webinar in our PBK series. That's going to be towards the end of Feb. I will send out an email, so check for your reminders. And in February, we will also be sharing an email with all COP members to apply to become part of a small pilot, where we COP will accompany and support these few pilot group members in producing PBK outputs from their respective organizations. So please check for the email that sends out that call. Then you'll see the link there also for more PBK sources on the SVRI website. And please, again, look at the chat for the links to the outputs and resources provided by Raising Voices. But that is it for today. Thank you so much again, Dennis and Gloria. Thank you for everyone joining here in the session and for those of you watching the video afterwards. It's been lovely to be with you, and we look forward to meeting with you again at the end of February. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.